Manili Monse Mpingo.
That means greetings to the church in Chitambuka, and the response would be Yewo.
So let's try that again, and you respond this time. Manili Monse Mpingo.
Yewo.
Tonga Chamani.
That means thank you very much.
So as we began this time of interpretive assignment, preparing for it, we wanted to have a scripture that spoke to us during our time of discernment before we went to Zambia and also for our time after we have arrived, but also a verse that would speak to the journey that our Zambian brothers and sisters are walking with their church in Zambia. So this is the verse we've chosen, Isaiah 43:18 through 19. This is the word of the Lord. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland.
First, I want to warn you, we may go a little past 12, but we will stop well short of the typical 3-hour worship service that we have in Zambia. Everyone in Zambia is a farmer. No matter one's profession, including pastors, they have a plot. It may be big or it may be small, but it's going to be planted mostly with maize or corn to feed themselves and their families. Charity Monda is one of these subsistence farmers. We first met Charity when she met us at the end of our driveway soon after we arrived in Lundazi. She came to greet us, but she also wanted to know if we might have any work for her. We hadn't decided whether we were going to have somebody working in our homes, and we decided to go visit with our new pastor, Reverend Chibaboka, and some of our friends from our new church to get their thoughts, and they thought it would be a good idea as we were starting new work and being out in the field. So they helped us with the interview process with several applicants, and in the end, they recommended that we hire Charity for the job. We soon learned that Charity is a widow raising her own children and one grandchild. We also learned that in a country where there is so much poverty and unemployment, that being able to offer a job to someone is an act of compassion. And we're glad that we're able to help Charity better be able to care for her family. In addition to working for us, Charity is also a subsistence farmer. Nearly every square inch of the land surrounding the rent house she lives in a few doors down from us is planted with some kind of a food crop. She's got maize, she's got sweet potatoes, greens of various types, beans, onions, and peas. And she and her family depend on these food crops to survive. In addition, she started a garden at our house that we share with her. You see, we have water at our house that we can have a garden in the dry season, and she doesn't at her house. Like Charity, most smallholder farmers in Zambia farm just to survive. Can you fix that? There are different definitions for smallholder farmers, but in the Zambian context, a smallholder farms about 2.5 acres or less. That's not much land for folks here in Texas or any Western developed country. All family members, including children, are involved in farming activities, and it isn't unusual to see the children in their school uniforms walking home after with a djembe or a hoe over their shoulder on the way to their family's fields to work. In this photo, some of the members of the church in Chisefu are planting maize. Year in and year out, a family farms the same plot of land, and over time, the soil is depleted of its nutrients, with lower and lower crop yields realized, meaning less food for the family. As the yields decline, so do their hopes for having a surplus to sell for additional income to buy such things as medicine or pay school fees. One common practice in sub-Saharan Africa, went too far, which is detrimental to soil nutrition, is the burning of crop residues after harvest, preventing this organic matter from decomposing and returning to the soil. Not long before we left to come to the States, we printed some of these signs and had them laminated, put them on a stick, and stuck them in the ground around the perimeter of the farm at Chisefu with the hope that it would generate discussion about this practice when people came to the well there to get their drinking water. Yayi means no, kuocha means to burn. So we'll see if that was effective when we return. Sustainable agriculture is an approach to farming which seeks to address food security while working to protect the environment, improving profitability, and striving for social and economic equity. In other words, meeting the food needs of society without adversely affecting the ability of those who will follow us in the future. At Chisefu, as part of our partner church's holistic ministry, we are working in partnership with the Church of Central Africa, Presbyterian Synod of Zambia, to provide an education in sustainable agriculture using appropriate technology. Appropriate technology can be divided into two categories. We call those appropriate soft technology and appropriate hard technology. Think of it in terms of data processing. The computer equipment is the hardware, the programs and the apps are the software. Similarly, appropriate hard technology refers to the tools and equipment used, like the animal-drawn plow a few slides back, while appropriate soft technology refers to the methods or ideas, like the men planting the maize seed in the field. This short video demonstrating a hand-crank maize sheller shows an example of appropriate hard technology. Let's start it. This type of maize sheller's probably been around for over 100 years. If you were to find one here in the U.S., it would most likely be in an antique store. You can buy them in the hardware stores and the agricultural supply stores in Lundazi. We took it in to have a base mounted, to mount it on a base there at the welder's shop, and put some hooks so we could hang the bags on it so that when we turn the crank, the kernels from the cob would fall into the bag. This is old technology here, but as you can see from the crowd gathered around, this is something they don't see every day, and it's appropriate technology for the place. I'm going to have to take some spinach back to Reverend Urongo. He's having a hard time turning that crank. Harvesting, oops, did I go too far again? Harvesting maize by hand is seen here as an example of appropriate soft technology. And as I said, the method of planting that we saw a few slides back is another example. Another example of appropriate hard technology is a borehole with a hand pump. In this photo, we're repairing the pump after it quit during the dry season, leaving the villagers nowhere to get water. We had to replace a cracked cylinder at the bottom of the pump, and while we had it out of the ground, we added a few more joints of pipe to drop it a little further below the water table. At Chisefu, I work in partnership with the Church of Central Africa, Presbyterian Synod of Zambia, to improve agriculture in three distinct ways. One of my duties is serving as a lecturer on the faculty of Chisefu Theological College, where I teach courses in sustainable agriculture. The purpose of these courses is twofold. The first is to equip future pastors to be able to grow food for their own families once they graduate and go to a village to serve a congregation. Pastors in Zambia face many challenges. Many serve in remote, very rural areas that experience a high rate of poverty. By teaching them improved methods of agriculture, The hope is that these pastors can better care for their own families. But the second benefit that we hope for is that they can share that knowledge with members of their congregation and their village as a whole to help improve the lives of the people living there. Sometimes when I'm teaching, I wonder if the message is getting through to the students given the cultural and language differences. I've been told in some parts of the country I have an accent. It hasn't come up as much in Texas, but it did in New York and Pennsylvania last month. I was recently pleased to receive a text message from one of my students, Billy Sambala, asking about something we discussed in class, checking the moisture content of maize. Billy's a student on the left with the big smile holding the stick with the puff adder on it. Aflatoxin is a carcinogen which occurs in maize worldwide, but is especially problematic in Africa. The fungus Aspergillus flavus can grow and produce aflatoxin both pre-harvest and post-harvest. One way to reduce the likelihood of aflatoxin post-harvest is to ensure that the moisture content of the maize is at 12% or less. Here in the U.S. and other developed countries, there's electronic, automated moisture meters where you put a sample in, gives you a nice digital readout of exactly what the moisture of that grain or beans, whatever are. But we don't have access to that in Zambia at the village level. And so what we had talked about was something we call the salt jar test. You take a good glass jar with a lid that fits tight. You put 2 cups of maize or corn, you put a tablespoon of salt in there, put the lid on tight, shake it up and down real good, get that salt mixed in, let it sit overnight. Next morning you get up, you do it again, and if all the salt falls down to the bottom, your maize is dry enough to bag up and store. If it clumps up on the side of the glass, it's still too damp and you need to let it sit out in the sun a little while longer and dry. We talked about this in class. Billy remembered it. He couldn't remember the details, so he texted me. But when I saw him the next week, I asked him how'd the test go. He said his maize was dry enough to go ahead and store. But the important thing is Billy's going to remember this and share it with others. They don't have access to the fancy electronic gear, but most people can find a jar with a lid on it. A prayer request we have for the seminary at Chisefu is for the completion of a new 1x4 classroom block. It's a single building that will have 4 classrooms. We currently borrow a classroom from the elementary school in Chisefu, and we're hoping to finish this structure in the near future. Please join us in praying that we're able to do so. In addition to my teaching duties, my work also includes facilitating the work of the Chisefu Agricultural Income Generating Activity, known by the acronym AIGA, or more simply put, we're trying to farm to raise money. At the AIGA, as I said, we're farming to generate funds. The reason being we need to supplement the financial needs of the seminary as well as Chisefu Model Farm, which I'll be discussing in just a few moments. There's a high level of poverty in rural Zambia, and petty theft is common. As we invest labor and funds in our agricultural work in Chisefu, security is a concern. Please join us as we pray for the resources to construct a security watchman's house on the side of the Chisefu farm. While the AIGA will employ sustainable agricultural methods, it will also use more modern technologies with regard to equipment and other methods as funds are available in order to maximize income. In this photo, we've plotted the land which will be available to the AIGA in the coming season using a GPS app on my phone and inputting those coordinates into Google Maps satellite view. There's a cell signal just about everywhere in Africa, believe it or not. Additional land has been cleared, and this coming year the AIGA will have approximately 10 acres available for us to farm. More land will be cleared each year, and eventually we'll have 21 acres at this location. Agricultural storage is in short supply in Zambia, and most farmers must sell their crops at harvest time when market prices are low. Having a proper storage facility at Chisefu would allow the crops grown there to be stored and sold at a later time when market prices are better. In addition, such a facility would provide secure storage for tools, equipment, and agricultural inputs like seed and fertilizer. Please join us as we pray to have the ability to construct this facility in the future. A couple of slides back, I mentioned Chisefu Model Farm. Chisefu Model Farm is being developed by CCAP Zambia to offer training courses to Zambian smallholders on topics related to sustainable agriculture. Another function of the model farm is to raise food for the seminary students. That's our biggest budget item, is food for the students. Although the model farm is in its infancy, the Synods' vision is that one day we'll be able to offer week-long short courses on topics such as conservation farming, natural livestock systems, beekeeping, aquaponics or fish farming, and other such topics that will, with the hope that people will be able to use that knowledge to improve their lives. Charity and other Zambian subsistence farmers like her may, over time, learn new methods to help them restore the soil found on their plots through the use of composting, crop rotation, intercropping, and other appropriate technologies. As the soil is restored, it's hoped that the yields improve so families can make it through the hunger season, that time of year when all of their food crops from the previous harvest have been exhausted, but this year's harvest is still a few months away. And the sign in this photo is written in Chitambuka, and it tells about the neem tree, which the leaves can be used for to make a very effective organic bioinsecticide. We're not at a point where we can do week-long courses, but we can put a sign on a stick by the borehole and educate people in that way. Other prayer requests that we would ask for your prayers to lift up are for operating funds for the farm for this coming season. In May, we hosted a short-term mission team from right here, Mission Presbyterian. After spending the week seeing and learning about the holistic ministry of our partner church, one of the group leaders, Reverend Kren Van Tottenhove, remarked, "I've visited a number of countries before, which were called developing countries, but this is the first time I've actually witnessed a developing country and how its work is impacting the individuals and families at the local level." Kren was so moved by what he saw from the CCAP Shallow Wells program, two buttons at once. Bear with me. Well, it's there by the bucket. He was so moved by that, when he got home to San Antonio, he raised funds to provide 2 more villages with these wells. In the photo here, our friend from Northwood, Patty Clark, has a 5-gallon bucket of water on her head, just trying to understand the challenges faced by women and children that have to carry water for long distances, sometimes up to a mile. Because of this shallow well, people still have to carry it, but not nearly as far. In addition to agriculture and clean water, another ministry of CCAP Zambia is its health department, where Melissa's partnering with the church. So I'm going to turn things over to her now.
It was a beautiful day in September, and we were sitting under the shade of these mango trees in Palaza, a community in far eastern Zambia close to the border of Malawi. I was nervous that day, sitting in front of this group of community members, with the men all together on my left and the women all together on my right, and the community leaders, the village headmen, and the pastors sitting next to me and my co-worker, Mr. Richard Walima, who is the CCAP Health Department Coordinator. Mr. Walima was also new to his job at that point, having just been appointed to his position the month previously, and I think he was a little nervous that day too because he said that I should do the talking and he would translate. Since I couldn't speak the language even after 6 months of dedicated language learning. We were in Palazzo that day to learn about the community's needs for a new rural health center. The committee had been formed in 2013 when the CCAP Zambia Synod had decided that there was a need for a clinic in that community. There was an undeniable excitement among those people gathered under the mango trees that day that we were bringing them good news that their long wait was almost over. The community had made over 70,000 hand-molded and baked bricks and collected sand and gravel for the foundation in 2013 in the hope that the new health center would be built soon. But they're still waiting. They told us stories of women having babies on the road to the closest maternity center, which was 20 kilometers away. They talked about children dying from preventable diseases like malaria because there was no transportation or transportation was unaffordable. But the faith and the hope that this community has that God and the church is doing a new thing and will answer their prayers for improved health care is truly remarkable. After that meeting, we walked 2 kilometers down this dusty road, past the cemetery where many in their community are buried, to the site where those bricks were made. It was heartbreaking to see so many of those bricks being ruined by the weather during this long period of waiting. But this community has no anger or resentment. Instead, they have hope. Hope that the church and that God will soon bring them out of this period of waiting. They are sure that God is making a way, and they have hope for a beginning of new, improved health care in their community. Some of you may remember that when we were here the last time, I talked about I didn't have a designated role with our partner church, and I was in a period of discernment. So when we arrived, one of the things we started doing was attending church regularly. This is our church, the little pink building behind us. We also were put on the preaching rotation because elders preach more frequently than the pastor even does. And we had a little help in translation from our friends. And we've also danced and sang. Yep. This is the Dorcas International Choir, the women's choir at our church. And they're singing about Moses and the burning bush. And they're amazed that the bush is not being consumed by the flames. This is the men's choir, and our congregation is really big, so a lot of times we worship outside. And Charles is not dancing or singing, but he's giving the men a breeze, which is something the women typically do with those pieces of chitangi like we presented earlier. It's a way of letting you know you've done a really great job. We've also become members of the Madodana, or the Christian Men's Guild, and the Umanyano, or the Christian Women's Guild, which is a Zambian version of PW. My prayer request before we arrived in Zambia, and for quite a while after, was to have patience for me to see where God already knew He wanted me to serve. I'm grateful that I was able to be patient and say yes when our partner requested that I work with them in the health department. The health department had been active many years previous, but had been pretty much dormant since the building of their 2 clinics in Daiwala in 2003 and Egachikini in 2011. My coworker, Mr. Richard Walima, has said that what was once dead is now alive when he talks about the work between Peace USA and our work together with the CCAP Health Department. Part of my job is to empower him to feel confident in his role as department coordinator and to have him be able to understand what it means to work in partnership. And little by little, I'm starting to see that understanding grow. One of the first priorities we had as we began working in the department was to have a place to work. We needed an office. And Mr. Walima contacted the Synod leadership and asked if we could use a room in the church. Together, we have cleaned and painted, repaired the windows and the doors, hung some curtains, and he's found furniture. And a lot of these things Mr. Walima has done out of his own pocket. He's really proud of this office that we've made together, and this is a small example of what it means to build relationships and to work together in partnership. As Mr. Walima and I have tried to continue to learn as much as we could about the needs that the CCAP Health Department works in, we went to a lot of meetings. This is the Ministry of Health's rubella vaccine campaign. Meetings are not the most exciting work, but they're vital to understanding the needs of a community and to the other parties who are working in those areas. We also visited our 2 clinics in Egechikini and Daiwala, and this map kind of gives you a better idea of where we are in Eastern Province. Not long after the visit to Palazzo, we traveled to Egechikini to visit the clinic there. And to meet the staff, Mr. Samui Ngundi, who is the in-charge officer and the nurse providing all of the medical care for the clinic, and the environmental health technician, Mr. Kafula Sampa, whose job it is to work in the community to provide health education. Egechikini Rural Health Center is in the village of Egechikini and was built by CCAP in partnership with Peace USA, the Medical Benevolence Foundation, and the Zambian Ministry of Health. The clinic was built in 2011, and the population of their catchment area is over 7,400 people, and there are 53 villages within that catchment area. The day we arrived, we found Mr. Ngundi and Mr. Sampa and the whole Community Health Committee waiting for us. And there were also several hundred women and kids there that day because it happened to be the government's rubella vaccine campaign that day. But despite the busyness of the day, Mr. Sampa and Mr. Ngundi and the committee took time to meet with us and tell us about the successes and the challenges they face at the clinic. The clinic provides basic health care as well as maternal care, which includes prenatal care, labor and delivery, and postnatal care. They also provide male circumcision, HIV testing and counseling, child growth and monitoring, and family planning services. They also work outside of the clinic in those 53 villages to provide education on issues such as sanitation, nutrition. They do cooking demonstrations to encourage a wider variety of food. But they also talk about malaria, how to prevent it, keeping the grass cut and the water not standing around your house. Malaria is one of the major problems in sub-Saharan Africa and especially in Zambia. The month that we left was the peak of the malaria season, and they had over 1,400 confirmed cases of malaria in that 1 month alone. The clinic has insufficient medications and test kits in the best of times, but in the worst of times, like the peak of the malaria season, those resources are typically depleted. The slide always takes a long time to change. I'm not sure why. The greatest success they told us about was the amazingly low rate of maternal deaths. They've only had 1 maternal death in 1,000 live births since 2013. This is truly incredible given the resources and the setting that they have to work in. The community truly loves Mr. Ngundi, and the women trust him to give them and their babies a safe delivery. This trust is evidenced by the constantly changing group of pregnant women, their moms or their sisters or their aunts, who travel as far as 15 kilometers to come and hang out at the mother care shelter, which is the part of the clinic where the women come and stay and wait to go into labor. During my last visit to the clinic, I met these three young ladies, Charity Peary, Shelley Bota, and Angela Tio. Charity is 20 and unmarried. Shelley is 17 and Angela is 19, and they're both married. And they're both lucky because their husbands have allowed them to come to the mother care shelter, because that doesn't always happen. Charity, Shelley, and Angela know they can't wait to go into labor in the village before they travel to the clinic, because they understand that delay in care is one of the major causes of maternal complications. These women come to the clinic despite the terrible conditions that include no beds and dirty mattresses, and the overcrowded conditions that result from this unfinished mother care shelter. God has an amazing way of putting you right where He needs you to be. And in this picture, it was April, and I was in Eggetchikini with another mission co-worker, Luda Garbot Welch, to talk about community health evangelism, or CHE. CHE is a Christ-centered spiritual educational model of community development that helps communities recognize their resources, because every member of a community has a resource, help them understand and recognize their problems, and find solutions to those problems using their own locally available resources. Reverend Narango is one of the CHE facilitators, as well as the pastor of the Eggetchikini congregation and chaplain of the clinic. And he received a phone call that day during this meeting saying that we were needed at the clinic for a meeting. So we hopped on his motorbike and headed for the clinic. Mr. Ngundi had applied for membership in the Church Health Association of Zambia, or CHAZ, and the CHAZ site inspectors had shown up that day unannounced and needed to know that the clinic was truly a part of the church. Church affiliation is a requirement for membership in CHAZ. CHAZ is an amazing organization that works in religious clinics and medical facilities to provide lots of great resources like medications and test kits, malaria tests, but also mosquito nets. They provide educational opportunities for the staff and the community as well. If we had not been there to answer those questions that day about the church affiliation and the clinic, that application probably would not have received any further consideration. But I'm really glad to be able to tell you that that application has now been approved, and they will start receiving resources from this organization. Reverend Narango and I are truly grateful that God put us right where He needed us that day. I would ask you to keep the health department and the two clinics in Eggetchikini and Daiwala, as well as the Plaza community, in your prayers. There are so many unmet needs, but I know and they know that God is truly doing a new thing through the partnership between CCAP and PCUSA. And they're not dwelling on the past, but they're looking forward with hope to the future. We would love for you to join us in the Health Department partnership, and some of the prayer requests that we would ask that you pray about are improved infrastructure, like the new clinic at Plaza or the mother care shelter at Eggetchikini. They also need transportation in the form of motorbikes or bicycles or ambulances to reach out into those really large catchment areas. They also need medical equipment and beds, but they also need funds for educational programming so we can start preventing diseases and not just treating diseases. Our partner, CCAP Zambia, through their holistic ministry, is working to strengthen the capacity of all Zambians to ensure that they have food security, a quality education, appropriate health care, and a safe environment. The way PCUSA does mission is through partnership, and I hope that you've been able to see that partnership in the work that Charles and I have shared with you this morning. When we arrived in Lundazi, our first and most important job was to learn. And even though we've been there for 15 months, we still have a lot to learn when we go back in November. We are so grateful that this congregation has made the decision to partner with us in that ministry. And it doesn't mean that you have to jump on a plane and come to Zambia, but we would love for you to come visit us. But you could just learn about Zambia. So we have some papers for you outside the sanctuary that you can pick up and take home and learn a little bit about Zambia and our partner church. And you can also find our mailing address on this side. It's really an encouragement to us to go to the post office and find cards and letters from people like you, letting us know that you're thinking and praying for us. You can follow us on social media also, our Facebook page, and all of the other ways that we try to stay connected. You know, as Presbyterians, we're a connectional church, and we want to stay connected with you guys. We want to thank you again for your generous donation to our support. It's congregations and individuals like you all who make it possible for Charles and I and the 127 other mission co-workers around the world to be serving in the countries that they're serving in. So thank you so much for your generosity.
Sometimes when we travel visiting churches, people are surprised that we have to raise our own support. In the old days, when churches sent in their undesignated giving, a specific percentage automatically went to Presbyterian World Mission, and mission co-workers or missionaries back in those days didn't have to raise their support. That model changed about 20 years ago, but it wasn't communicated to the churches that we depend on so much. The average annual cost of supporting a mission co-worker couple is $138,000 a year. That's not our salary, but we do get a salary that's a fraction of that. It covers medical insurance, housing, business travel, education for families that have children, and so on. But the real point we want to leave you with is this. $138,000 would be a tremendous amount of money in the hands of our partner church. But as Melissa said, we work in partnership. We are there at their invitation. They didn't ask for money. They asked for mission co-workers to walk the journey with them together in service to the people of Zambia and God. So we thank you very much for your support.
So we want to thank you for your support. And as our friend and co-worker, Reverend Dr. Victor Chilengi says, may the Lord richly bless you. Thank you.